Caterpillar builds the most famous bulldozer on Earth, the D11, 112 tons of raw muscle. For decades, nobody could touch it. But right now, in mines across the planet, there are machines pushing bigger blades, burning more fuel, and moving more dirt than any cat ever has. One of them makes the D11 look like a toy. By the end of this video, you'll know the 10 bulldozers that keep Caterpillar's engineers awake at night. Let's go. Number 10. Komatsu D475A. Let's rewind to 1976, because this is where the panic actually started. For years, Caterpillar's biggest dozer, the D9, sat at the top of the food chain, and Cat sold them faster than they could build them. Then a Japanese company nobody in Peoria took seriously rolled out the Komatsu D475A. Here's why it mattered. The D475A weighed roughly 76,000 kilograms, about 167,000 pounds, and it made 620 horsepower. At that exact moment, that was bigger and more powerful than anything Caterpillar had in its entire lineup. Think about that. The undisputed king of dirt suddenly did not own the biggest machine on the field, and it was a foreign rival who took that title. This is the machine that forced Caterpillar's hand. Cat engineers had already been quietly building prototypes of a monster called the D10, but Komatsu's move, combined with pressure from other rivals, is a huge part of why Caterpillar rushed that elevated sprocket D10 into production by the late 1970s. The D475A didn't win the war, but it fired the first real shot, and it proved something dangerous. Caterpillar could be beaten on size. Every giant Komatsu dozer that comes later in this list, and there are several, because Komatsu became Cat's #1 nightmare, traces its DNA straight back to this machine. The D475A is the reason Caterpillar stopped assuming it would always own the top of the market. If you want the single moment Cat first got nervous, it's this one, back in 1976, when a company from Osaka decided it wanted the crown. Number 9. Allis-Chalmers HD-41. Now we go back even further, to 1969, and to a machine most people have completely forgotten, but Caterpillar hasn't. At the Conexpo show in Chicago, the American company Allis-Chalmers unveiled the HD-41, and it dropped jaws. This thing produced 524 horsepower, and at that moment it was the largest crawler tractor in the entire world. Not the largest in America, the largest anywhere. And it wasn't built by Caterpillar. To understand the sting, you have to understand the era. In the late 1960s, Caterpillar's flagship D9 was making around 410 horsepower, so the HD-41 wasn't beating Cat by a little. It was towering over Cat's best by more than 100 horsepower. For a company built entirely on the idea that bigger and tougher means Caterpillar, that was a genuine problem. The HD-41 story got even more interesting a few years later. In 1974, Allis-Chalmers merged its construction equipment division with Fiat of Italy, and that lineage produced the Fiat Alice 41B, still carrying that 524 horsepower punch while Cat's D9H was stuck around 410. So for years, an American-Italian partnership was fielding a machine that simply outmuscled the mighty D9. Here's the part that matters for our story. Historians of Caterpillar's own D10 development point directly at machines like the HD-41 and the 41B as the competitive pressure that pushed Cat to build something bigger. Caterpillar didn't create the legendary D10 in a vacuum. They created it because rivals kept building crawlers that made the D9 look small, and the HD-41 was one of the very first to do it on a world stage. Allis-Chalmers eventually faded from the giant dozer game, but the HD-41 earns its place on this list as the machine that first publicly embarrassed Caterpillar on size. It planted a seed of doubt that Komatsu, and everyone after, would spend the next 50 years exploiting. Number 8. BEML BD355. Now let's talk about a threat that isn't about being the biggest. It's about being everywhere Caterpillar wants to sell for less money. Meet the BEML BD355, built in India by Bharat Earth Movers Limited, a company that's been making heavy machinery since 1964. The BD355 isn't a mining monster. It's a 46,550 kilogram crawler dozer making 416 horsepower from a turbocharged BEML engine, with a power shift transmission and a range of blades from small angle blades all the way up to around 24 cubic meters of capacity. On paper, that puts it right in the class of Caterpillar's bread and butter D8 and D9 dozers, and that's exactly the point. This isn't the class where Cat prints trophies, it's the class where Cat prints money. The mid-sized to large construction and mining dozer is the volume seller, the machine that fills contractor fleets across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East by the thousand. And here's why Caterpillar should be nervous. The BD355 is aimed squarely at price-sensitive markets where a brand new machine and cheaper parts can beat a premium Cat badge. In India alone, listings for the BD355 show it being sold and rented across the country at prices that undercut imported machines. Multiply that across every developing economy building roads, dams, and mines, and you've got a competitor quietly eating away at Caterpillar's single most profitable segment. Caterpillar's whole strategy relies on customers believing the extra cost is worth it. Machines like the BD355 challenge that belief every single day, backed by Make in India manufacturing muscle and a company that already builds mining trucks, excavators, and rail equipment at scale. You don't have to build the world's biggest dozer to hurt Caterpillar. You just have to build a good enough one, cheaper, in the markets where Cat wants to grow fastest. Number 7. Komatsu D375A8. Back to Komatsu, because you're going to hear that name a lot on this list, and there's a reason for that. The Komatsu D375A8 is not the flashiest machine in this video. It's something scarier for Caterpillar. It's the reliable workhorse that shows up in mine after mine, quarry after quarry, and does the exact job Cat wants to be doing. It weighs roughly 74,000 kilograms, about 163,000 pounds, and it slots right into the large dozer class as a direct rival to Caterpillar's big machines below the D11. Why does a mid-giant like this make Caterpillar sweat? Because this is the class that decides who actually owns the mining and heavy construction market. The absolute biggest dozers are rare, trophy purchases. A mine might own one or two. But machines in the D375 class get bought in fleets. They rip overburden, build haul roads, push scrapers, and reclaim land, day and night, all over the world. Win this class, and you win the volume game. The D375 line has been refined across generations, and the current versions bring cleaner emissions, better fuel efficiency, and Komatsu's proven powertrain technology into a package that customers trust for tens of thousands of hours. It carries a big semi-U blade, serious ripping power at the back, and a reputation for durability that goes toe-to-toe with Caterpillar's own legend. That reputation is the real weapon. For a century, Caterpillar's greatest asset hasn't been horsepower, it's been trust and resale value. The D375A8 attacks that asset directly, offering a machine that mine managers genuinely believe will run as long and cost as little per ton as anything wearing a Cat badge. When your rival is matching you not just on size but on reliability, in the exact class where the most money changes hands, that's a threat you can't ignore. Number 6. Liebherr PR776. Now we bring in the Germans, and they didn't try to beat Caterpillar at Cat's own game. They tried to change the game entirely. The Liebherr PR776 is a roughly 74-ton mining dozer making around 768 horsepower from a big 12-cylinder Liebherr diesel, swinging blades up to about 22 cubic meters. Those numbers put it in the D10 class conversation. But the headline isn't the horsepower, it's what's underneath. Almost every giant dozer on this list, including Caterpillar's, uses a mechanical drivetrain, an engine, a torque converter, a transmission with gears. The PR776 throws that out. It uses a fully hydrostatic drive, the largest hydrostatic crawler dozer in the world. Instead of shifting through gears, the engine holds a steady, efficient RPM while hydraulic pumps and motors deliver infinitely variable power to the tracks. There's no shifting, no torque converter loss in the same way, and the machine can keep full pushing power even while it's turning under load. For Caterpillar, that's an uncomfortable idea because Liebherr is claiming real advantages: lower fuel consumption, less wear on the tracks and undercarriage, and smoother, more precise control. Undercarriage and fuel are two of the biggest operating costs in the life of a mining dozer. If a rival can genuinely cut both with a different kind of drivetrain, that's not a gimmick. That's a threat to the total cost per ton math that Caterpillar uses to win contracts. The PR776 also brought single joystick control, a clean modern cab with great visibility to the blade corners, and Liebherr's mining-grade build quality. It became Europe's flagship answer to the American and Japanese giants, and the newest generations keep pushing efficiency and operator assist technology even further. Here's the strategic sting. Caterpillar has since chased efficiency hard with its own electric drive D11, a sign that the industry is moving toward exactly the kind of smarter drivetrain thinking Liebherr helped popularize in this size class. When your competitor's design philosophy starts pulling the whole market in a new direction, you have to follow. That's real influence. Number 5. Shantui SD90C5. For decades, there was an unwritten rule in the world of super heavy bulldozers. Only America and Japan could build them. Then China tore that rule up. The Shantui SD90, in its latest SD90C5 rock configuration, is the largest, highest horsepower bulldozer ever mass-produced in China, and one of the largest on sale anywhere. It weighs around 105 to 106 tons, stretches about 11.5 meters long, and makes roughly 900 horsepower from a big Cummins QST30 diesel, driving a blade with around 45 cubic meters of capacity. That is genuine D11 class territory. But raw size isn't even the most nervous-making part. Shantui built this machine as a direct strategic weapon to break what it openly called the foreign monopoly on giant dozers, and it loaded it with technology to make the point. Shantui has pioneered 5G remote control operation, commercializing what it describes as the world's first 5G remote-controlled high-horsepower bulldozer back in 2019, letting an operator run these machines from the safety of a control room instead of inside a dust-choked mining pit. Now stack that against the two things Shantui is famous for. First, price. Shantui bulldozers are consistently among the most cost-competitive on the planet. Second, scale. Shantui has ranked as the world's #1 bulldozer manufacturer by production and sales volume for years, cranking out machines by the thousands from its factories in Shandong. So here's Caterpillar's real problem. It's not just that China built a 900 horsepower dozer. It's that China built a 900 horsepower dozer that's cheaper, packed with cutting-edge remote tech, and backed by the highest volume bulldozer factory on Earth. And it's aiming that machine at the exact mining markets in the Middle East, Africa, and Asia where Caterpillar makes its biggest profits. For 100 years, world's biggest dozer was an American and Japanese-only club. The SD90 kicked the door in. Number 4. ACCO Super Bulldozer. Now for the strangest, most unsettling machine on this entire list, because Caterpillar's own parts were used to build the biggest bulldozer the world has ever seen, and Cat didn't build it. In the early 1980s, in the town of Portogruaro in northern Italy, a company run by a man named Umberto Acco constructed a machine so enormous it still holds the record today, the ACCO Super Bulldozer. It weighs a monstrous 183 tons, over 400,000 pounds. It's more than 12 meters long from the tip of its blade to the claw of its ripper. Its blade is about 7 meters wide and nearly 3 meters tall, bigger than anything Caterpillar has ever manufactured. The ripper on the back stands around 3 meters tall on its own. And how did they power a machine this size? With two Caterpillar diesel engines mounted horizontally opposed, producing about 675 horsepower each, for a combined output of roughly 1,350 horsepower. So the largest, most powerful tracked bulldozer in human history was built mostly from Caterpillar components, then scaled up into something Caterpillar itself never dared to build. Here's the twist that makes it legend. The ACCO was commissioned for a massive land development project in Libya, but international sanctions and trade embargoes on Libya in the 1980s meant the finished machine was never shipped and never put to work. It sat. For years, it slowly turned into a rusting monument in an abandoned yard, before collectors stepped in to rescue and preserve it. To this day, the biggest bulldozer ever built has essentially never done a real day's work. But think about what it represents. A small Italian firm, using Cat's own engines and parts, proved that a machine could be built that dwarfs the mighty D11 in every dimension. It's a permanent physical reminder that Caterpillar's flagship is not the ceiling of what's possible. The king of dozers can be outbuilt, and it already has been. Number 3. Komatsu D475A8. Now we get to the machine that fights Caterpillar's flagship in the real world every single day in active mines right now. This isn't a museum piece or a prototype. This is the Gladiator. The Komatsu D475A8 is Komatsu's direct answer to the Caterpillar D11, and it's still in full production. The current Tier 4 version weighs around 112,600 kilograms, about 248,000 pounds, and makes roughly 899 horsepower. Put those numbers next to the D11. The cat weighs about 112,700 kilograms, with around 850 horsepower at the flywheel. That's not a competitor that's close. That's a competitor that's dead even, and by some measures, slightly ahead on weight and power. This is the fight Caterpillar cannot afford to lose, because the top mining dozer class is where prestige lives. When a mine buys the biggest, toughest dozer in production, that purchase sends a signal about which brand a customer trusts with its most demanding, most expensive work. For generations, that answer was automatically Caterpillar. The D475A is the machine that turned it into an actual question. And Komatsu backs it hard. The D475A has been in production since the mid-1980s, constantly refined, and it's earned a reputation as a beast for ultra-heavy ripping and site preparation. It's in such demand that it's recognized as the largest rental bulldozer available in Asia. It carries a huge blade, a monster single-shank ripper, and the same durability reputation that makes Komatsu so dangerous in every class. Here's the strategic picture. When your one-of-a-kind flagship, the machine your entire brand image is built around, has a rival that matches it ton for ton and horsepower for horsepower, and that rival is cheaper to buy in many markets and easier to rent, you no longer own the top of the mountain, you share it. And Caterpillar has spent 100 years believing that mountain belonged to them alone. Number 2. Komatsu D575A3 Super Dozer. And now, the machine that actually did it, the machine that walked up to Caterpillar, took the single most important title in the entire bulldozer world and held it for decades, the Komatsu D575A3 Super Dozer. Prepare for the numbers because they're absurd. In its Super Dozer configuration, the D575A3 weighs 152,600 kilograms. That's over 336,000 pounds, roughly 40 tons heavier than a fully loaded D11. It's powered by a 12-cylinder Komatsu SA12 V170E diesel producing 1,150 horsepower, and its standard Super Dozer blade holds 69 cubic meters, about 90 cubic yards of material in a single pass. With an optional blade that climbs to around 96 cubic meters, roughly 125 cubic yards. One push of this machine moves what would take an average person hundreds of wheelbarrow loads to shift. Now compare that to the Caterpillar D11. The D11's blade holds somewhere between about 34 and 44 cubic meters depending on the configuration. The Komatsu's blade holds 69 and up to 96. That is not a small edge. That is the cat's flagship being lapped by its rival. In the one metric, how much dirt you move per pass, that defines a bulldozer's entire reason for existing. For years, the D575A held the crown as the world's largest production bulldozer, full stop. Not the largest in Japan, the largest anywhere, sold as a real product to real customers in surface mines across the United States, Australia, and Japan. When the first Super Dozer went to work at a coal mine in West Virginia, it reportedly nearly doubled the yards moved per operating hour. That is the productivity nightmare Caterpillar had to answer. Komatsu eventually moved the D575A to custom build-only status, but the message was already delivered and permanent. The most iconic name in earth-moving, Caterpillar, spent decades not owning the title of world's biggest dozer. A Japanese machine owned it. That is the single clearest reason Caterpillar has ever had to be nervous. Number 1. Caterpillar's own reckoning. So what's number 1? Here's the twist. The biggest sign that all these bulldozers made Caterpillar nervous is what Caterpillar did next. For 100 years, Cat's answer to every threat was the same. Build it bigger, build it tougher, bolt on more horsepower. But the machines on this list attacked from angles that raw power couldn't beat. Komatsu matched Cat ton for ton with the D475A and outclassed it with the D575A. Liebherr changed the drivetrain conversation with hydrostatics. Shantui came with 5G remote control and unbeatable pricing. BEML came for the profitable middle. Every one of them chipped at the idea that Caterpillar is automatically, permanently the best. And Caterpillar blinked in the best possible way. It poured its engineering into the D11XE, an electric drive version of its flagship dozer. Instead of a traditional mechanical transmission, the D11XE uses an electric drive powertrain built on Cat's own decades of electric drive experience. Caterpillar claims it delivers constant power to the ground, dramatically better fuel efficiency, longer intervals between rebuilds, and far fewer moving parts than the machine it replaces. Think about what that means. The company that dominated earth-moving by building the biggest, most brute-force diesel machines on Earth is now racing toward efficiency, electric drive, and smarter power delivery, the exact territory rivals like Liebherr pushed the industry toward. That is not the behavior of a company that feels untouchable. That's the behavior of a company that looked at the competition and realized it had to evolve or lose. That's the real number one. Not a single bulldozer, but the pressure all of these machines created. Pressure so real it forced the king of the industry to reinvent its own flagship. The Komatsus, the Liebherr, the Shantui, the ghostly ACCO, and the forgotten Allis-Chalmers didn't just compete with Caterpillar. Together, they changed what Caterpillar had to become. If you learned something, hit subscribe, because next time we're breaking down the mining trucks so big they have staircases. See you in the next one.